Welcome to the OrangeNXT podcast series.
Welcome to a new episode of the OrangeNXT podcast series. My name is John Coates and I will be your host and moderator of today. Today in this podcast we will go into the AI for industry, and to talk about this subject I have invited Stela. Stela, may I ask you to introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
Hi everyone, I'm Stela Sola, and I'm the leader of AI solutions and strategy at Microsoft. I work with customers and Microsoft sellers around the world to enable organizations to really see the value and benefit of AI technology within their business.
Very good. Welcome on the show today, Stela.
I'm super happy to be here, John.
Yeah, Microsoft is investing a lot into AI. What I know from you, Stela, is that you are leading a global team towards the democratizing of AI solutions for all of your customers and partners. So my first question to you, can you elaborate on what Azure AI is and what does democratizing of AI solution mean to you?
It's a very common question that I get. So when it comes to Azure AI, it's really a set of Azure services, cloud services, and we roughly group them into 4 key areas. So we have Azure Machine Learning, which is really technology that's able to digest large volumes of data, able to make sense of it and build predictive models. Then we go to the second type of AI service, which is cognitive services. You could think of this as a highly specialized Azure Machine Learning model, but really cognitive services starts packaging that capability into more easily used modules. So for example, object detection, text analytics, all of these kind of cognitive services enable you to perform some specific function. And then we move on to cognitive search, which is a really exciting area. And I know OrangeNXT has such a strong skill set in the cognitive search space. Cognitive search leverages all those cognitive services that we spoke about before to help to understand all the unstructured data that's out there, as well as structured data. And so if we think about the data estate of an organization today, about 80% of the data that any company has is unstructured. So these could be audio files, these could be drawings, video files. How do you actually access the data in them, get those insights and make them actionable? And that's what cognitive search enables. It uses that cognitive services capability to mine through all of the structured and unstructured data sources. And then the 4th key area of Azure AI is bots. And this is enabling digital agents and interactions between users, whether that is internal or external, and getting to the information they need. So typically, Azure AI services are used by developers and data scientists to build solutions. And you asked me, what does democratization mean?
Yeah.
So if Azure AI is used by developers and data scientists typically, then how do we enable everyone to benefit from AI? And so democratization for AI means that you don't have to be an expert to benefit from AI. And this has informed our product development. So we have some no-code or low-code AI that is integrated into our Dynamics, into our Power Apps, Power Platform, into our Office. And this means that whether you're a really expert developer or data scientist, or a sales leader, marketing leader, or a business analyst, no matter your skill set in the area of AI, you're able to benefit from AI technologies.
It's a great answer. So also myself can do it, you say.
That's right. Yeah, analysis on, meetings, customer engagements, pipeline, anything like that. Even you might have already seen it in PowerPoint. Whenever I design a slide, I get the designer popping up recommending slide design to me, which is very useful because I'm a terrible slide designer.
Yeah, it makes life easy for everybody.
Exactly.
So during Microsoft Ignite, we saw some new innovations. What helped, like semantic search capabilities, and touched upon in the previous podcast already. But also I saw Azure Arc, Percept, Synapse, but also Purview. So what is the idea behind those new innovations, and what does it bring to the people? Can you elaborate a little bit on this, Stella?
Obviously, they're very, very different technologies. What I would think about is the underlying principles that we're trying to activate, as you mentioned. So what I would think about is how all these technologies help an organization get a holistic view, holistic management of the data estate. And then how do you get holistic governance, holistic insights? There is a lot of competitive advantage and very powerful insights to be had when you bring all the data together into a single view. And then you're able to break through the silos of different organizational units. You're able to unite structured and unstructured data, and you're able to bring together, whether it's cloud data or on-premises data. There is power in seeing the whole data estate together. And so these technologies are supporting organizations to build this data capability of a unified view of the data estate, so that then it could be extracting really powerful insights and analytics and supporting with intelligent decision making and intelligent action. And also it can support a simplified way of governing, ensuring high security, consistent security across the different data estate locations, and also ensuring policies are implemented based on what the organization's policies are.
Yeah, yeah. It's also what I see. So a lot of organizations of all types, they are leveraging all AI capabilities that Microsoft provides as a partner in the rapidly ever-changing world. And we as partners are trying to build innovation solutions for our customers. So in a way to reduce cost, redefine client engagement, and also accelerating decision making. So a question that rises up in my mind is, what are your thoughts about how customers can accelerate their business using Azure AI?
We are currently seeing AI adopted across all areas of the business. And in fact, if we look at the last 12 months or just over a year since we entered this global situation and the pandemic, AI adoption has skyrocketed. There is a really interesting statistic that was released by McKinsey that said throughout 2020, machine learning adoption grew from 55% of organizations to 80% of organizations. So it's now the majority, and it's across all functions and business units. So if I think about what we are seeing, we're seeing adoption across the way organizations engage with customers. So providing digital agents, and especially we saw it during the COVID response, digital agents were needed to provide large volumes of data and information to large volumes of people who were needing information about COVID response. So that was a huge adoption pattern. We also saw personalized experiences be on the rise. And so how can, whether it be the community or a customer that's accessing services online, how is that experience personalized for that individual? Then in the area of kind of internal employee empowerment, we did see an increase in knowledge mining scenarios. And if you imagine, individuals who are working from home now, they still need access to everything they needed before to do their work, right? And so they are needing to get access to, it could be an image that used to be in the office in an archive. It could be PDFs, contracts that was somewhere stored. And so knowledge mining and being able to provide all the data, the full data estate at the fingertips of each employee, that became super important. And we also saw an emergence in data science tools, cloud data science tools being used. So as analysts and data scientists were working remotely, they could still do their day-to-day work. Now, in the area, again, thinking internally, the area of operations became a very high pain point for many organizations. And so we saw a lot of pressures to save cost, right? There's a lot of cost pressures in the economy right now. And so organizations were implementing automation scenarios, automating processes, getting more predictive maintenance scenarios, predicting demand, load balancing, their assets. So a lot of optimization in the operation space. And then I guess finally what we saw is in some new experiences being provided. So new products, new services being provided in this response. We also saw a change in how customers and how the community and people were behaving. And so in terms of understanding the demand patterns, the usage patterns of customers, suddenly new models needed to be built to understand the behavior, and this informed the products and services being developed. And so we saw AI being implemented there as well.
Yeah, I can share the same feeling. It's what I see. The pandemic is really accelerating AI use within customers, and also ourselves are developing a lot of the tools with it. But I still see that there's a challenge within the organization to build these AI-powered organizations that can be really challenging, let's say. So could you share some insights on where the team sees the challenges at the customers building AI or powered organization? And what is an AI-powered organization by your means, and why is it so important now?
And I want to expand that a little bit and talk about data and AI-powered organization, because definitely what we're seeing is that an AI-powered organization is really dependent on the data capability and the data culture in the organization. And so what we've seen is these two things, the data and AI capability and the data and AI culture. They are really affecting an organization's ability to respond right now. And those two components, I would say, make up this data and AI powered organization. So if I think about some of the core components of data and AI capability, the first one I think about is the data estate, and migrating, modernizing that in a way that allows it to be accessed, to be holistic, and so that we can get to the next stages of data capability. The next stage, for example, is cloud native apps. So does your organization have the capability to build applications rapidly that will scale in a rapid way? We saw unprecedented demand for certain services during COVID. And so does your organization have the capability to rapidly scale? So this tool set, these design principles and these capabilities for cloud native apps are important. We also get to an area around analytics and insights. So once you have this data estate in a single view, the analytics and the insights you can get from it are tremendously powerful, because you've broken down the silos across different organizations, across different databases, across on-prem cloud. And so what are the tools? What are the processes? How are you surfacing the data to individuals to use to leverage data and analytics? So how is that capability? And then on top of that, we see the data science capability as very important, and data science and AI capability, because this is where the technology could help to augment individuals and organizations to do even more with that data, to build powerful models, predictive models, to understand more of that unstructured data together with structured data. And then finally, it all comes together with a capability of governance. So an AI-powered organization is also lifting its standards of governance across the entire data estate, setting those policies, security, having high transparency, responsible use of data, and AI implementation. So this is really kind of that final rounding capability that rounds it all together. Now, to balance these data and AI capabilities is the data and AI culture. And we find that the two are really needed together in order to recognize the ROI of the data and AI powered organization. And so that data and AI culture, we have seen three core factors be a part of that. The first one is the democratization, and the word comes up again, right?
Yeah,
the
there it is.
Democratization of access to data. So we want to put data at the fingertips of all of the users across the organization, because that's when true powerful decision making happens across the whole company. The second fundamental area of the data and AI culture is empowering individuals across the organization, whether that be leaders, managers, or individual direct reports, empowering them to make data-oriented decisions, impact-oriented decisions. And this is because, just because something might be traditionally done a certain way, or someone might say to do things a certain way, doesn't actually mean it will be generating an impact. And so this is a real mind shift and a cultural shift for an organization, moving to empower every employee to make and sponsor and champion data-oriented, impact-oriented decisions. And then the third component of this data and AI culture is around skilling, because there is, as you're making this access to data democratized, access accessible to everyone, as you're empowering everyone to make data-oriented decisions, how are you equipping every individual with the right tools, the right expertise, the right strategies? And this is across business and technology roles. How are you empowering them to actually take advantage of the data capabilities and the data that's out there? And so for businesses, we have been recommending the AI Business School that we worked with INSEAD, the university, to package together, so online, freely available. And for technology roles, we've made a set of trainings available through MS Learn. And this is just the starting point. There is a lot of training out there, and I know OrangeNXT can also support organizations with this skilling component as well.
Very good, very good. You already mentioned it a little in your answer from the question that I just raised, but with technology, the sky is the limit. But unlocking success from AI solutions is not only a technology effort. This is what you already said. It's also about data culture. But what I see is that customers adopting AI, that they get stuck in the incubation phase or at the proof of concept phase, how you want to call it, feeling like that they are not in the position to deploy or to scale their AI projects, which obviously limits their ability to get value and level of innovation they are looking for, and basically also to propel their business moving forward. So the question that I have for you, Stela, is this: could you share some insights to your observations about how to avoid getting stuck in this, let's say, gap?
We do see this quite a lot. We're also seeing a lot of organizations climb out of this. So there has been a rapid climb, and it's probably because of the necessity of the current environment, right?
Exactly.
Organizations can no longer afford to do experiments and hobby projects. It needs to be real impact. So a couple of things that we have observed. I would say the very top one is leadership sponsorship. So when you think about AI projects, typically they become these pet hobby small projects or experiments if it's led by one individual direct report and they're just learning. Then it doesn't really get anywhere. However, if you have the executive sponsorship, if you have the leadership involved, then straight away there is a gravity that pulls the project towards business goals and outcomes. It also provides that sponsorship to carve the path for evolving the project and progressing it forward. So executive sponsorship, leadership involvement is the first one. The second one that's kind of part of that is success criteria that's completely aligned to business goals and objectives and needs.
Exactly.
So it's not just trying a model out, seeing how accurately it can predict something. It's about solving
the technology.
Exactly. It's about solving like a real need right now. It's not about the technology. It's about the business goal and needs. So it might be, and I'm going to make it up, it might be supply chain forecasting. Maybe an organization wants to reduce wastage in that, or it could be demand forecasting, for instance, from a customer, right? So you want to be predicting real, based on real scenarios and delivering real improvement to those models. So that one, I would also think about the inclusion of experts, because quite often AI gets placed with a developer or data scientist, but they may not be the experts in a particular field. So let's say that it's and again, I'm going to just brainstorm and make up some examples. Let's say that it's a field technician that is visiting facilities and providing some kind of maintenance or support on them. What's really interesting is a developer and data scientists probably have no idea what that experience looks like. But straight away, if you bring that subject matter expert, who maybe they're a field technician themselves, maybe they're managing a team of field technicians, but when you bring that expertise in, suddenly the AI models can become much richer, because that day-to-day experience and expertise can contribute insights that the expert individuals already have about the business, and so it can help accelerate the model development. It can help accelerate the AI solution development. And then I would also suggest skilling. I know I touched on skilling earlier. We do see that every organization wants the benefits of AI. However, many organizations, and I would say the overwhelming majority, are struggling with the complete toolkit or skill set when it comes to AI. And so investment in skill development is another one on how to avoid to get stuck in that gap.
Yeah. To sum it up, I think the success criteria from a business perspective, by interviewing the correct stakeholders, have executive leadership, sponsorship on that one as well, will really help you closing the gap or jumping over the gap, so that you are really get the power of AI in your business objective. So when the pandemic strikes a year ago, more than a year ago, let's say, I saw personally a lot of the customers took a moment to recalibrate themselves. Really, what we call in the Netherlands a handbrake moment. Everybody was like, complete still. Everybody was looking into ways to preserve out-of-pocket money, to optimizing the way of work. What I personally saw was a huge surge of activity around making AI real on 3 scenarios, like business process optimization. You already touched a little bit upon already. How can we make the process optimized, because it will reduce cost. Employee productivity, the same thing, but also from a customer service perspective. How can we serve our customers better, especially when we are all working from remote locations and we're not allowed to go on site anymore. So my question to you, Stela, how do you see this? Basically, if you look back a year and compare it with today, what pops up in your mind? What could emphasize what I observe, or do you see it completely differently?
Actually, we saw the same thing, and Satya Nadella, our CEO, he even shared how 2 years worth of digital transformation happened in just 2 months.
Yeah.
And so I think it talks about just the major change that happened over a year now that we've been in this pandemic global context. And I really relate to what you mentioned, the handbrake mode. I didn't realize that was what is spoken about in the Netherlands, so that's a great one. We did see organizations go through tremendous shock, where no assumptions could be trusted anymore. No models and previous historical data could be relied on to predict things. And so I get that handbrake mode. And so what we saw was organizations were rapidly trying to make sense of this. And we saw organizations engage with customers more, try to rebuild those patterns and predictive models. We also saw organizations trying to find new ways of being successful. So many of them had to establish new routes to market, new engagement patterns, new services and products. And so some of the scenarios that we saw very highly adopted, it included customer engagement. And we spoke about bots earlier, and rapidly being able to deliver information to communities and consumers and customers. So customer engagement was an area that we saw a lot of investment in. Automation, another one, because everything became much more costly. When you shut things down, it's like the money doesn't come in as much, but the cost is still there. And so automation, cost optimization, these became one of the predominant scenarios as well that we saw. I'm also thinking about, we touched on the employee empowerment internally as well. We saw that as a response to try and provide the tools, particularly cloud tools, as individuals were working remotely, to provide cloud tools to employees to be able to still be productive in a remote setting. So, we touched on data science tools remotely. We touched on knowledge mining scenarios to help provide all the information, all the data estate that an individual needs to be successful. So that's what we saw over the last year as organizations were rapidly trying to make sense of the world.
Yeah. So knowing what Azure AI is, what Microsoft is making it accessible to everybody, what it takes to embed it and technology to use. Basically, I was wondering which industries are front runners in adopting AI and what it takes and what for kind of scenarios and what kind of technology they will use. And most importantly, why is it true from your perspective? So not getting stuck in the AI chasm, jump over it, make it happen. Can you give some insights on that? Like what kind of industry is there in the dominant industry, or is it not that clear to say?
There isn't a dominant industry. I laugh about this because we were just talking about it yesterday as my team, and we were looking at the data. All industries are adopting AI. And in fact, we're starting to get into this world where we notice the absence of AI, not necessarily the presence, but we notice when it's not there because an experience may not be as customized, or it may not be as accurate, or we may not be able to digest the large amount of data and build an accurate model. And so what's interesting is to see that AI is being adopted across all industries. And there are probably across industries, there is a profile of organization that is adopting it more. And so we're calling these, it's not a creative name, we're calling it AI leaders, right? There's AI beginners, AI intermediate, and AI leaders, not very creative.
Yeah.
But the AI leaders are actually taking leaps forward. And it's because they're investing in the data and AI capabilities over the last short period, and also on the data and AI culture. And so what this is empowering them to do is rapidly respond to a very changing world. And it's making these AI leaders the front runners. Yep. And so there's front runners that have shifted to the head of each industry, and it's based on their data capability and data culture. And so the scenarios we spoke about already around, conversational agents and bots, we also saw contact centers be on very high adoption and redesign during this time. Automation, cost efficiencies, demand forecasting, all of these items, all of these scenarios were very heavily adopted by the AI leaders. And I think one of the things that might have driven this rapid adoption and the acceleration of AI leaders is that there was such high pressure over the last 12 months, over a year during the pandemic. There was such high pressure from business to improve the cost, the margin, the profitability, to respond rapidly. And so this pressure actually accelerated the development even further and has put the AI leaders even further front.
Very good, very good. So I would like to share the possibility to the audience where they can find more information on this topic of today, and which I would love to share in the comments, of course, of this podcast, so that everybody can take a look at it afterwards. So my question is, where would you want the people to go to in order to learn more about Azure AI and other topics of what we have discussed today?
I would say my most favorite way to learn is from real implementations and real examples. And so the first one I would recommend is to take a look at the customer stories that are on the OrangeNXT page and on the Microsoft page. So these are very powerful ways to see real implementation and real experiences today, including real impact and ROI. Yeah. I also suggest AI Business School, I mentioned it earlier. it is really critical for business leaders to become experts in the kind of value and the kind of scenarios that AI can contribute. And it includes some implementation and change management best practices in there as well. I also suggest, the usual technology pages. So there is Azure AI Services technology page to take a look at kind of the deeper details. You can always get hands-on through a trial or a lab. And then OrangeNXT has a fantastic acceleration program, and maybe John, you'll share more or put the link in. This is a great way to get a scenario up and running in a rapid way with very highly expert individuals from OrangeNXT.
Thank you. Thank you. So for my final question, for potential customers who are watching this podcast, what do you want them to take away from this podcast? So what is your key takeaways from this podcast?
Key takeaways, I would say AI is core to the business now.
Yeah.
We've seen major adoption that has really put some organizations as AI leaders, and AI leadership seems to be translating into business leadership and industry leadership. In fact, we see those organizations who have adopted data and AI capabilities and culture have 4 times increase in revenues and customer satisfaction than others. And so it's very paramount. Data and AI capabilities and leadership today are very paramount for competitiveness and business health. And I would suggest focusing on it in those 2 ways, thinking about the data capabilities, building the tool sets, the infrastructure, and then building the data culture in the organization as well, so that you continue maintaining leadership in the industry and you can build new scenarios. That would be the key.
Thank you. Great takeaways. So this has been a great conversation, Stella. It's time. It's a wrap. Thank you so much for taking the time and share your story with us and the people who are watching. So on behalf of Stella and myself, thank you for your time and attention, and see you next time in a new episode of the OrangeNXT podcast series. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shane. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the OrangeNXT podcast series.